Everyone thinks that high performers win because they're smarter or harder working, but it really comes down to these 8 rare traits I'm going to break down in this video. Some of these feel wrong, a little bit weird, and many of them you may have never heard before, but don't worry, I'm going to break them down in a detailed way so you can go and implement these in your life and become a high performer yourself. Let's get into it. Rare trait number 1, grit. Hard work is common, grit is rare. Grit is the ability to go and persevere through any obstacle. I know from building businesses, both in good times and in bad, that I would have never gone and made it through half of the challenges I've been through if I didn't possess grit. And it's something that I also value inside of the teams that I'm building inside of my companies. People that are able to go and deal with different challenges, not avoid them, not try to scurry away from them, but actually go right into the storm. The weird thing is, I think a lot of people view grit a bit differently than I would. Oftentimes people think that grit means just sticking with something no matter what. But the truth is that grit's actually knowing when to give up on something so that you maybe lose the battle, but then win the war. An example may be that you have a business idea and despite trying and trying and trying, it's just not working. And in fact, it's just a bad idea. So you give up on that one idea only to pursue your bigger calling in a bigger, more profitable idea and end up winning the long-term race with that. Grit isn't just about sticking with something when it just makes no sense or stupidly persevering. It's about being smart, being calculated, and despite what anyone else says, sticking to what you know will work and sticking with it until the job is done. Rare trait number 2, optimism. And I'm not just talking about some toxic positivity here. Optimism is having this positive outlook on things, even when things are going wrong. Having that ability to see the bright side in things. Sometimes even when there's just complete darkness. Being optimistic allows me, even in the most challenging times, just to find that small morsel of energy, that space to just get back on my feet and keep going. I've had many years of my life being far too negative, and it doesn't just affect me, but it affects the people around me and my ability to turn things around. Had I just been positive, had I just been optimistic and seen the brighter side of things, I would have been able to more easily rebound from these struggles versus getting sucked into them and struggling to get out. An example of staying optimistic in a hard time is maybe, you're building a company and someone all of a sudden who's key to your company quits. Well, in that moment, you have the option of going and complaining to all your mentors and advisors and friends about the hardship you've now experienced. Or you can just say, maybe there's a blessing in disguise here somewhere. Then start looking for new opportunities from that challenge. Oftentimes, the biggest crises in life are also the seeds to the biggest opportunities. And so it's finding that opportunity no matter how bad things can get. So how do you go and become more optimistic? Well, sometimes taking a break from things, getting some space. If that means taking care of yourself so that your own general demeanor and approach to life is positive by, working out, taking time for nature, meditating, reading books that kind of fill your brain with great ideas, finding mentors, advisors that show you the opportunity in any given moment and get you out of any pessimism you're currently feeling. I'm not saying that as an example, I'm, innocent here. There's definitely times where I get down on myself or I find myself complaining, but it's just knowing that that part of you is not the best part of you and then eventually rise above it and get out of the soup of negativity. The highest performers I know are optimistic over the long term, but slightly paranoid about the short term. What this causes them to be is long-term patient, but short-term impatient. They're gonna get into a given skill. Let's say they wanna go and grow on YouTube. And long-term, they're gonna see, wow, the potential there. They're optimistic about where it's gonna go and the benefit they can have in their given niche. On the other side though, in any given week, they're being impatient about learning, finding the best tools, traits, finding the best teammates and systems and skills so they can go and level up fast because overall they have this long-term optimism. Rare trait number 3, not being an asshole. The reality is, if you want to be a high performer, you have to surround yourself with other high performers. The first thing that's going to cause people to go and run away from you is if they just can't stand to be around you because you're an asshole. I say this all as a recovering asshole. When I was 21 to 23, I was building my first business, and due to the insane stress load and candidly having no clue what I was doing, I was a piece of shit to be around potentially. Just really hard to get along with, pessimistic, negative, and generally just had a kind of overall negative demeanor because the stress was getting to me. I wasn't getting good sleep. Life was rough. This didn't just affect me, right? But it affected others around me, their ability to go and solve problems. While we ended up being successful, it came at a price. When it comes to not being an asshole, I think the things to reflect on are like, how would people around you go and grade you? How do you go and grade your happiness on a day-to-day basis? How easy are you to get along with? The reality is that, we all have bad days and good days, and it's not just about agreeing with people on every single thing, but at a certain point, people have to enjoy being around you. There's a tax for being an asshole. The tax is that people quit. The tax is that people don't want to tell others to go and work with you. The tax is that you're miserable day to day, and the tax is that the relationships around you suffer. And the reality is when we look over 50 years and 100 years of a great life, it's the relationships that matter. So don't be an asshole. Rare trait number 4, be a storyteller. Your story is your strategy. Your ability to go and tell the story of your background, tell your origin story, tell the stories of the challenges you've overcome, separate high performers from everyone else. So the ability to go and inspire people through a great story is a rare trait. And high performers double down on stories when they're looking to go and chart out a new mission for a business, or when they're looking to go and hire other people, or when the dark of days come by and you gotta rally the troops around some common mission. It is stories that are the seed to their success. Customers buy a product because of a story. Team members join your team because of a story, or investors go and invest in your company because of a story. It's your ability to go and build a narrative around your thing, or a narrative around your big vision for a product or for a company or the journey you're on that will inspire others to join you and to take action and be part of your movement. In order to create your story, you need to view yourself like a character. What are your beliefs? What are your values, right? And kind of world building around that. As that main character, what is the big vision you have for the world? Making it inspiring, making it something that others can go and be a part of. What are some of the biggest hardships you've overcome, and how did you overcome those? This is what's going to make you more relatable to other people and help them see themselves in your story. Going and taking a step back to think about the core stories that have shaped you are what are going to allow you to go and motivate people and help get the best out of them as well. Rare trait number 5, relentless resourcefulness. Here is the fair warning to start this off. More money equals less resourcefulness. Let me explain. When you are flush with cash as a company, as an example, you start to go and just spend money to go and solve problems. And most of the time, you just keep on wasting it and causing everyone just to get intellectually lazy. The truth is, when you build constraints around yourself, those constraints breed creativity. Pressure makes diamonds. And when you find yourself not being able to just throw money at problems, it forces you to go and think outside the box. All great leaders out there have a story of when their back was up against the wall, they had to find a way to innovate or they were gonna die. Whether it was Steve Jobs and Apple at the brink of bankruptcy, Ferrari at the brink of bankruptcy back in their day, the stories of leaders that have had to go and innovate, had to find a way when everything looked like it was gonna die, all comes down to their ability to tap into theirs and others' relentless resourcefulness. So given the fact that constraints actually help you, the truth is that you can tap into this trait with absolutely nothing. You don't need a bunch of money to start that business. You don't need to go and make sure you have the perfect diet before you can start going to the gym. You don't need to go and wait until you have the perfect instrument to start playing music. The truth is, relentless resourcefulness comes down to starting with what you've got right here, right now. Rare trait number 6, obsessive pattern spotting. Obsessive pattern spotting comes down to connecting abstract ideas to go inform your own point of view and approach to the world. I know in my own life, from obsessing over founders podcasts and then linking that with different biographies and books that I've read, going and talking with different mentors and advisors, eventually you're able to go and interlink these different ideas to come up with solutions that are a little bit outside the box to common problems. I know, for example, in any business that I've created, I honestly haven't even known a thing about that industry before getting in. Before starting Founder OS, I had never built a community. Before starting BitMaker, I'd never built a school. school. Before building Herb, I never built a media company. But it was through the patterns that I'd already seen in other spaces and from my research and from talking to mentors that I was able to connect these dots and create something special. A lot of the high performers that I'll go and interview for different companies, they'll talk about the fact that, in their spare time, they're reading different books and they're maybe working on different art projects while also maybe learning an instrument. But from all of this practice and this development of mastery in a bunch of different areas, they're able to bring those learnings and those patterns to their current work. When you look into history at some of the best entrepreneurs and investors, pattern spotting is a core trait. With Steve Jobs, it was noticing patterns in ways of, Zen philosophy, merging that with the simplicity of art and the minimalism of a lot of the core products he had studied over history that inspired him to go and remove all of the buttons from the iPhone, as an example. Or, on the investing side, Charlie Munger was known for studying the greats across biology, psychology, and understanding, that investment wasn't just about going and making good financial decisions. It was also going and studying human behavior and biology and bringing those core learnings to investing to make smarter decisions. It's so easy to go and get addicted to trends or the hot new thing, but oftentimes history leaves clues. If you're wondering, what AI's trend line is going to look like over the next decade, look back to the 2000s and the invention of the internet. You're looking to see where that new piece of technology is going. Well, look at the adoption of things like phones or the computer. Oftentimes, it's actually by looking back and spotting the patterns that we can then go and apply those things to present day problems to just wrap our heads around it a lot faster. Don't chase new ideas, just chase the patterns that are hiding under new disguises. Everybody wants new ideas, but your rare edge is looking backwards to see the patterns, the clues, and then applying those to the present moment and not just getting caught up in trends. This can go and help you in day-to-day life because truthfully, oftentimes when, tough times happen, you can think you're so special. I know sometimes when it first hits me, I'm dealing with a crisis, I'm like, oh my gosh, how could I ever get through this? But then when I come to my senses and take a second to just calm down a bit, you realize that there are thousands, if not millions of people that have encountered the exact same problem you have, and that there's a proven technique for getting over it. Don't reinvent the wheel, look for the patterns and apply them today. Rare trait number 7, strategic laziness. I get it, this one seems a little bit weird, but let me explain. And when you're going and building something as a high performer, you gotta realize at some point that you can't do everything. You gotta be a bit lazy. You gotta go and make sure that you're building different systems, teams, people, companies that can do more of the work for you. Strategic laziness really comes down to strategic leverage, seeking help from things like technology that can go and help you, tools that can go and unlock new possibilities, people that can go and serve your mission and help you build something. It comes down to media that can spread where you just create one thing and it goes and is multiplied 1,000,000 times over. When you get a bit lazy, you start to spot the patterns of leverage underneath your fingertips from code, technology, media, people, and capital. One example of strategic laziness that I use in my life is by having my $5,000 an hour rule. So knowing that I'm only gonna go and double down on tasks that are above that hourly rate, and I'm just gonna be lazy with stuff that's below that and find someone else or an automation that can go and do it without me. Inevitably having the wherewithal to go and know when you should automate and delegate are what's gonna allow you to unlock bigger things in life versus just working hard blindly on stuff that you should have no business doing. So strategic laziness isn't about doing nothing. It's about leaving space for your own genius to emerge. It's, taking that road trip just to get some space from the problem. It's taking 10 minutes to meditate before a meeting so you can go into it a little more clearly. It's taking a weekend off or taking a whole week off, just so that you can go and start to reevaluate your priorities instead of just doing something that's no longer giving you joy. Don't confuse this with being lazy, right? It's strategically lazy and giving yourself space to think much more deeply. When we look back to the history of humans and technology, so much of the major developments as a species have come from being lazy. Whether it was the computer, the tractor, the pulley. These are all examples of going and finding something so that we could go and do less, inventing something so that we could be more lazy. It all comes down to efficiency, right? This desire to do less by inventing something that allows you to do more. So just so you really understand this concept, right? You have strategic laziness and destructive laziness. Strategic laziness meaning inventing new ways of doing things that allow you to do less. Destructive laziness is you just doing less and getting less done. Pick one over the other. Rare trait number 8, shameless asking. Asking is the ability to go knock on doors and sell something that is not yet built. It's the ability to go and ask someone for help when you're scared. A lot of what we have to do in life is to lean into our discomfort, and despite every morsel of our body telling us just to shut down, don't do it, give up, it's that ability to be brave, right? To be courageous and to just ask for the thing that you want. This one really hits home because it helped me a lot when I was younger. At 21 years old, I started a technology boot camp called Bitmaker, where we trained full stack software engineers and got them jobs at top tech companies. One day, a few enforcement agents from the government came in and they thought we were operating a private career college and weren't registered. So they tried to shut us down. This was probably one of the most traumatic moments of my life. I had no idea what to do. When I finally came to my senses, I realized that what I needed to do was that I had to ask for help, and a lot of it. So sure enough, over 2 days, I went and emailed 3,000 people for help. Paul Graham, Vinod Khosla, Chamath. One thing led to another, and the North American tech community rallied behind what I was doing, and we were trending on Twitter in Canada. 1 week later, I got the only exemption of its kind in Canada to operate Bitmaker, and we eventually had a successful exit. In these moments, sometimes we find ourselves thinking that we got to do everything. We have to know what to do, when oftentimes you just need to have the courage to ask someone for help. It's not about what to do, right? It's about knowing who can help you, to mobilize people, to get the leverage out of those people around you that do want to give you a hand. You've just got to go and lean in and ask for help. Ask someone for an intro, ask someone for a resource, ask someone for a system that helped them when they were in your position. Your ability to go and leverage the people around you and to ask for help is a key thing. Now, if you're starting out and you're curious, and you're nervous, how do I go and ask? One thing you can be doing in good days or in bad is also just making sure you're giving back to people. Every time you give to someone, you help them out, you build a bit of an asking bank. That ability that when things start getting a little weird or you need a bit of help, you can then build up that goodwill and go and ask someone to give you a hand. And so asking, even when it feels super uncomfortable, is a real superpower. If you're building a business, you need to make sure that you're attracting high performers to what you're building. I've gone and created 21 questions that allow you to go and attract high performers to your business, your vision, and your mission. And you can go and get it via the link in the description. So those are the 8 rare traits of high performers. Go and apply these to your life and make sure you're surrounding yourself with people that possess these. Thanks for watching, and let's win together.